It's Wednesday, June 8th, 2016, and this is KBIA's Views of the News. Our weekly roundtable on media behaviors comes to you from the Futures Lab studio at the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Amy Simons, and here with me are my colleagues, Mark Hinojosa and Ernest Perry. Tronc. Soon enough, that'll be the new name of Tribune Publishing. Why the change, and what might this mean for the back and forth with Gannett? A rape victim's impact statement, all 12 pages of it, is published on BuzzFeed, and Ashley Banfield read it aloud on CNN. We'll look at the effect that it's having on the discussion about rape culture in America. And the Today Show's Savannah Guthrie announces she won't be covering the Rio Olympics because she's pregnant, and her doctors advised her against it because of the Zika virus. Will other NBC employees follow? There's a lot more that hopefully we'll get to as well, but we'll start with Hillary Clinton clinching the Democratic nomination for president yesterday. Or was it Monday? That's one of those things that the Sanders camp, the Clinton camp, and the media can't quite seem to agree on. Did she or didn't she? Because the AP was ready to go with it.
Well, the AP went with it.
Yeah.
I mean, they basically, what they did was they polled the superdelegates, and they looked at the numbers, and they basically said, look, she has, after Puerto Rico's vote on Saturday, she has enough votes to be the presumptive Democratic nominee. They went with it. They ran with it. Others jumped on it right afterwards, and after last night with the win in California and New Jersey, she has enough votes of the voters.
But what made that impressive was that they didn't just call on that night. They'd been in touch with those superdelegates all along, and they'd been tracking them. So when it came to that crucial number, they already had a relationship built up, and you weren't going to get, I don't think you got as many, I'm sure I'm voting for Hillary or I'm not. They had been able to systematically follow what was going on, and they knew the 95 that weren't going to vote, and they knew the ones that were. So that's a pretty reliable number to me.
And here's the thing that I don't understand. I mean, I understand where Sanders supporters are coming from, because they're basically saying, look, you've pretty much given it to her. Why should we care about what's going to happen in California and New Jersey
And
the
there
next
were
day?
6 states the next day that were
were.
going to the polls.
Right. But, I mean, to me, they're upset with the fact that they came out with this news. But for AP was saying, look, these are the facts. We've done our due diligence. We've done what journalists are supposed to do. Are we supposed to sit on this and wait for California, even though at this point we see it as somewhat irrelevant, unless you have a whole mass of people who change their minds, which even Sanders people admit is probably not going to happen.
But does it matter? Does it matter if you call it on Friday or Saturday?
I don't know.
I mean, you get bragging rights.
Well,
I'll give you bragging rights
yeah,
on this.
yeah.
But does it? And they did the work, the due diligence to get there. But the New York Times calls it the next day. Does it make a difference from the historical perspective of the first woman, candidate? Does it make a difference if you call it on Friday or Saturday?
I don't think it makes much of a difference. The whole is she or is she not has really made a difference in the last couple of weeks, because
we've known.
We've known it was
The math was already there.
Right.
So it's just bragging rights of being first.
Pretty much.
Well, last week we talked about Trump having the media's number, that he's kind of been playing us. And heck, maybe this was finally the week we started to fight back. BuzzFeed pulled out of a $1.3 million advertising agreement with the Republican National Committee over Donald Trump. An insider told Politico it couldn't have employees there make ads or have the site promote things that limits its freedom and make it harder for those employees to live their lives. Bold move, or not really much of a difference?
Donald Trump's not going to BuzzFeed to look for votes. That's not his base. That's not where he's going to find votes. So I'm not sure whether or not BuzzFeed's decision is going to have that much of an impact. I think what it does say is that, okay, you do have a media outlet that is basically saying, look, we're going to stand up for our employees, which is different from the way it's done by newspapers, or have been done by newspapers in the past, where they've turned down political ads, but it's usually because they're afraid of what that might mean to their relationship with their readers and with their constituents, the backlash.
Yeah.
So, but in this instance, or in this case, they're looking out for their employees, because they're saying, look, our employees will have issues here because many of them are foreign born, many of them work overseas. We don't agree with what Trump is saying or the actions that he said he would take if he wins this election.
Yeah, my concern is how much is there's so much sponsored content out there now that will they take a sponsored content piece from someone, an article that's basically bought and paid for, versus taking an ad. And that's the sort of that thinner line to me that you're gonna have to follow. If they're turning down all of it, sure, that's fine. I don't think, like I said, as you said at the beginning, I don't think that they were going to go to BuzzFeed anyway. It ain't the demo for them.
No, it's not. It's not. The question is, will we see this with other news organizations? Because Trump is already saying things that many news organizations will find, at least those who are leading them will say, wait a minute, that's offensive. Do you run that?
So we've talked recently about the Huffington Post and some of the connections that the Huffington Post has in terms of some sponsored content, or Ariana Huffington's connections with Uber and with her book and the promotion of that. Maybe the Huffington Post becomes one of those standard bearers, given the disclaimer on the bottom of every single story about the Huffington Post perception of Donald Trump, if they step away in a deal like this.
Yeah, that could play out here.
I mean, in the meantime, they could still be taking that money, as they've gone publicly and said he's not a good guy.
Okay, look at it this way. Yeah. BuzzFeed made a business decision based on a moral high ground that they wanted to take. The Huffington Post has made a journalistic decision based on what they claim are the facts. These are the facts that they line up when we look at Donald Trump. We see everything that he's done in terms of the way things that he said, things that he would like to do as being racist, and we're going to call him on that until his narrative from his perspective changes.
Interesting time that you bring that up. There were several other instances of the media checking Donald Trump this week. There was the CNN graphic that pointed out his lies with the words on the screen in a lower third super. There was WCPO TV pointing out that he had retweeted a photo of a black family purporting to support him, but that photo had been stolen from WCPO's website and used entirely out of context. Hint, the family in that photo says it does not support Donald Trump, and that photo was taken at a black family reunion in Cincinnati last summer, at an event having nothing to do with Donald Trump. There was also the interview with CNN's Jake Tapper, in which Tapper asked Trump if his attack on the judge in the Trump University case was racist. And he had to follow up that question 23 times until he finally got an answer. Let's listen to a snippet of that interview.
If you are saying he can't do his job because of his race, is that not the definition of racism?
No, I don't think so at all.
No?
No, he's proud of his heritage. I respect him for that.
You're saying he can't do his job because of it?
Look, he's proud of his heritage, okay? I'm building a wall. Now, I think I'm going to do very well with Hispanics.
Citizen?
You know why I'm going to do well with Hispanics? Because I'm going to bring back jobs, and they're going to get jobs right now. They're going to get jobs. I think I'm going to do very well with Hispanics, but we're building a wall. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico. The answer is he is giving us very unfair rulings, rulings that people can't even believe. This case should have ended years ago on summary judgment. The best lawyers, I have spoken to so many lawyers, they said, this is not a case. This is a case that should have ended. This judge is giving us unfair rulings. Now I say why. Well, I'm building a wall, okay? And it's a wall between Mexico, not another country.
But he's not from Mexico.
In my opinion,
he's from Indiana.
I showed that clip in its entirety, the full 5 minutes and 29 seconds, to my beginning reporting class yesterday, and they kept laughing, and I couldn't really tell if they were laughing because they thought it was funny, because they thought that Tapper kept going at him so hard and eventually succeeded. But you got to hand it to him for going at it 23 times till he got the answer he was looking for.
Well, that's, I think, really interesting, is that the media has been giving so many passes to Trump on stuff. He gives answers that we know are false, and then we just go over them. In this case, this is astonishing to me that you can't. I mean, this guy's from Indiana. So when do you stop being Jewish? When do you stop being German? When do you stop being whatever and become American? Where does that line get drawn?
Well, this guy was born in the United States. That makes him an American.
Exactly.
And have American citizenship just based on that.
Yeah, but the perception of I'm an American, that I'm part of this. The disturbing part to me is that Trump is willing. Well, a man who's running for the highest office in the world is complaining about a judgment he's getting on a small case, right? And this is the point. At any point in your life, you want to say, my lawyers are handling this. This is not my job. This would be it. But he's also just not. He's not campaigning to be the president of all of us. He's campaigning to be the president of a select group of people. And then he's using this identity politic thing to say, then there are these others. And if, I'm brown, then I'm one of the others. And no matter, my family's been in this country for 7, 8 generations, right? 9 generations. We were here before you, when it wasn't a country and it was Texas and da-da-da, right? We've been here forever. And yet I can still be classified by Trump as being, his sympathies are with Mexico. I have no sympathies with Mexico. I've been to Puerto Vallarta. I don't have I have no connection to Mexico. And yet, because of my name and color, I can be classified by a man who's supposed to be my president or wants to be my president as an outsider. And that's the scary part, that it's not a unification issue.
Well, I think you're absolutely right on all of those points. And I think Jake Tapper was trying to pin him down on that. Yeah. And to me, this is the kind of journalism, these are the kinds of questions that you're going to start seeing from a lot of journalists. Now that we're getting into the general election, you're going to see them finally challenge him. When you say a wall, what kind of wall are you talking about? Who's going to build this wall? Who's going to pay for this wall? Who's going to be on one side of the wall? Who's going to be on the other side of the wall? You're going to start seeing people challenge him. When you say that this person is unfair to you because of their heritage, what do you mean by that? Yeah. What heritage? The fact that they're from Indiana, or the fact that they're from Texas, or the fact that somewhere down the line, say 4 or 5 generations ago, their forefathers came from another country? Well, guess what? So did everyone else.
All of the rest of us.
These are the kinds of things that I think journalists need to be hitting back on.
And you almost saw Donald Trump kind of, if you go back and watch the full clip, at one point when he says how proud the judge is of his Mexican heritage, and he goes, and I'm proud of the heritage, too, that I have. Almost as if acknowledging and then wanting to very quickly disavow the fact that perhaps he, too, came from an immigrant background once upon a time.
And here's the other thing. Not only are they going to be questioning Trump, they're going to be questioning his supporters, especially the leadership of the Republican Party, Ryan and McConnell. They both came out the next day and literally called their presumptive nominee a racist for the statements that he made. So now you've got a whole different dynamic.
Senator Mark Kirk in Illinois yesterday pulling his endorsement of Donald Trump as well. Let's talk about that photo from WCPO for a second. How big of a problem is that? We're talking about a presidential presumptive nominee retweeting something somebody else had frankly stolen the photo and used it out of context. Is that on Trump for having retweeted it and put it out there? Or is that kind of the social media world?
The social media world's a train wreck right now, I think.
Well,
because you are doing this. People are, trolling the internet and pulling photographs up because it fits. I mean, if you've seen the Google page for this, there are 50 black families in that search field.
And if you do a Google image search for black family, that shows up on the very first page.
Yeah, so they grab that because that one worked. But so that's the train wreck part of it. Did Trump say, go find me a black family that endorsed me? Probably not. Did someone in the staff say, boy, it would be nice to have a black family endorsing Trump, though? And we go to Google and we steal some image and put it up.
It's almost like junior high campaigning going on here.
It reminds me of 4th grade when we voted for the state fish. Don't be a dodo, vote for Coho.
I just don't understand it. But you're getting the traffic. So if the traffic is what you're hoping to get, you're getting that. Whether it's positive or negative, you're getting the traffic. So.
But it's also creating a perception, right? That process is creating a perception that says there are people of color who support me. Except
even though it's a false one.
It's a false. My Negro down here,
Well, he did just that over the weekend. There is my black man. And in saying that, it raises a whole other layer of racial insensitivity.
But I go back to the point that I'm making. Who are we talking about? We're talking about Trump, and we're not talking about
issues.
Clinton, and we're not talking about issues. So he's still getting all the conversation and all the publicity, and he's controlling the narrative. Whether you want to say it's positive or negative, he's still controlling the narrative.
And if he brings up Hillary's name, she's under FBI investigation. Now there are 3,500 lawsuits over the last 10 years, or some crazy number of lawsuits against Trump and his associated companies. That never doesn't get reported. the fact that we can keep the FBI investigation going becomes a topic.
And he still controls the room.
And he controls the room.
So we've been telling you for the past few weeks about the back and forth between Tribune Publishing and Gannett. Well, we've embarked on a new chapter in that ongoing saga. I'd like to welcome you to the era of tronc. That is Tribune Publishing's new name, effective June 20th. It's a portmanteau, kind of like an acronym, representing the first few letters of Tribune online content. And according to Chairman Michael Farrow, it signals a major shift for the company, which will focus on creating verified content across all platforms. And at the heart of much of its work will be artificial intelligence. What exactly is the plan here?
It's called rebranding. They're trying to rebrand in order to be able to show that this company is solid in spite of what happened with Gannett. So he got the $70 million infusion.
Right,
and
we talked
about this last
kind
week.
of the old school QR code concept.
It was a block. The 70 million, that's a block.
Yeah.
That raises the number for Gannett, right? Now he's got to deal with two people. But I mean, the Tribune suffered from a couple of things. When I was, in full disclosure, I was 17 years with the Chicago Tribune. I ran photo
and worked there
multimedia.
together. Yes,
we were together there. That we were old school. I mean, we were also making, profit levels that nobody had heard of. We were making 30% some years. So we were rolling in cash, and there was no reason to change for us. But we were slow to see the shift, the demographic shift in how people were consuming news. And that was to their detriment. And if you read articles now, they talk about how people who are leading in multimedia, they don't even mention the Tribune. Mm-hmm. Well, the Tribune invented this, right? And then let it slip out of its hands. And so now they're trying to catch up to something, to get back in the game. But the idea of tronc, which sounds like two guys in the south side of Chicago talking about the back of the car. What you got in the trunk, man? It's the idea of tronc. That's a distribution model. That's not a content model. And the core business of a media company like the Tribune or Tribune which is not Tribune Publishing, but Tribune newspapers, is to create news and distribute news. Tronc is a distribution network. It's not a content creation network. And that's the scary part to me.
Well, so when
a scary part.
Michael Farrow says that he wants to use artificial intelligence to produce 2,000 videos a day, it sounds like a mind-blowing concept.
Yeah.
Given the time and the effort and the energy that would go into all of those.
And how are you going to do that when you're every 6 months you're talking about a layoff?
Right.
So you don't have the people to actually do it. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, you need to be talking about the content because the distribution is Google and Facebook and Twitter and everybody else. They've taken over distribution. Mm-hmm. You still can control the content. And if they want to go in that direction, I think that's where they need to go and have some strength there. But if you're still trying to hold on to this belief that you're in charge of both the content and the distribution, you're opening yourself up for another hostile takeover.
The audience has moved. I mean, look at BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed starts out as a silly website, and then they create this very strategic and very serious arm to BuzzFeed. Bad name, good content. They bring in really good people. And that's how, once you stopped having to rely on printing presses, we lost an advantage, right? When it was $30 million to get in the game, nobody could touch us. When it was $100,000 to get in the game, we suddenly had a slew of competitors. And then you get a BuzzFeed who can build an audience with cat videos and then move them into serious journalism. We have the higher, newspapers have high overhead, no cat videos, and no way to kind of take a younger audience and drive them into serious content.
Okay, well, you may or may not know the name Brock Turner. He is the former Stanford swimmer who was convicted of sexually assaulting a woman behind a dumpster stopped by two Swedish cyclists who came upon the attack. A jury found Turner guilty in April, and late last week a judge sentenced him to what may be as few as 3 months in the county jail and 3 years probation. Mind you, he was facing 14 years in the state penitentiary. But the judge said a longer sentence would be too much of a punishment for the one-time star athlete and could have too much of an effect on his future. Juxtapose that for a moment with the woman he attacked. her past, present, and future have been affected. And I know that because I read the gut-wrenching 12-page victim's impact statement she made at the sentencing in the form of a letter that she read directly to Turner in the classroom, or in the courtroom, I mean. It was published word for word on BuzzFeed, and it has changed in a lot of ways the narrative around sexual assault as her words were put in the public's hands.
Well, and I think that was important, and anyone who hasn't read it, you can go to our website and you can read that. But what I'm seeing here is that even this has resonated across the spectrum, and even sports figures are basically coming out and saying, whoa, wait a minute, you're talking about this kid's life being impacted because of, as the judge said, as his father said 20 minutes of indiscretion. Are you kidding me? What about this woman's entire life and what's happened to her? And he gets six months, maybe 3 months with good behavior, and then he's out and he can go out and live his life. But she has to try to pick up the pieces and deal with this for the rest of her life. This is one of those instances where you go like, what justice system are we talking about?
But see, I disagree. This has been the justice system. This is, I see your point, but this is the justice system for a lot of people of color. If this kid had been black and going to, Emory Tech or some small school someplace, he's looking at 20 years, right? He's now never going to vote. He's never going to hold office. He's never going to have all the privileges that you lose after this. He's going to be locked up. This kid is a Stanford kid with parents who can afford best lawyers, the best opportunities, and they get him down to something that's laughable. Yeah. And that's what makes people of color crazy.
Well, so there's another media angle that comes along with this as well. It wasn't until Monday of this week that we actually saw his arrest mugshot, that the government entities in the police department in that municipality where he was charged wouldn't release it.
That when I saw that, I was going crazy because in the A block of every newscast across the country, it's mugshot.
And in this case, we saw his Stanford publicity photo from the swim team.
Yeah,
for months.
Well, to me, it's the media not pushing.
Exactly.
The media not pushing back on this story and not really giving it the coverage that it's due. You think about it. It didn't go nationwide until you got to this point. That should have been nationwide when we were talking about all the other sexual assault. We've been talking about Baylor. Mm-hmm. We've been talking about what happened at some of the East Coast schools, and now all of a sudden this comes up. But it's the end of the case when we're talking about it.
But even in Baylor, there's you get years of this going on before something happens.
Before we begin to pay attention to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So speaking of that, you guys mentioned Baylor. This all happened at the same time and in the same week that Ken Starr has stepped down as the chancellor and president at Baylor University about the handlings of sexual assault on that campus. The day after he resigned, he sat down for an interview with KWTX's Julie Hayes, and what started as a run-of-the-mill interview went off the rails pretty quickly, in a way no one would have predicted.
What about the victim that came forward saying that she had personally sent you an email and Art Briles an email saying in the subject line that she was raped at Baylor? Did you ever see that email?
I honestly may have. I'm not denying that I saw it.
But it's what happens moments later that brings the interview to a halt. What you can't see during this interview is my news director behind me. You also can't see a woman named Mary Spate, who asked my boss to promise not to use that portion of the interview. When he says no, she interrupts our interview.
Well, I want to point out, I need to talk to Ken Starr, Judge Starr.
Okay.
I need to talk to you, sir.
Okay, you ask great questions.
Okay, great. Can I ask you one more question?
I have got to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay.
So who is that woman? Well, she was introduced to the KWTX staff as a family friend of Starr's. Later, they found out that she was also once a press contact during the Reagan administration and provided Starr with crisis counseling while he provided testimony during Bill Clinton's impeachment hearings. Let's cut back to that interview and hear what happened after she had an opportunity to confer with Starr.
She needs to ask you that question again. Whether you do it on camera or not, it's up to you. I just want to make sure it doesn't end up misedited.
Okay.
We ask Starr again, and he answers, but turns to Spate, apparently for coaching.
All I'm going to say is I honestly have no recollection of that.
Of seeing any email?
Is that okay?
Don't look at me, look at her.
Then Starr answers again.
I honestly have no recollection of seeing such an email, and I believe that I would remember seeing such an email. The president of the university gets lots of emails. I don't even see a lot of the emails that come into the office of the president. I have no recollection of it. None.
I almost don't even know where to start. Is it with Spate's moxie, or is it Starr's amateur response?
This is junior high school, crisis communication. It's like you didn't prep him before he went to sit down about what he can say and what he can't say, and then in the middle of the interview you want to stop and say, whoa, wait a minute. We got to stop this because you shouldn't answer it that way. Unbelievable. But I do commend the television station for basically showing the entire thing and saying, wait a minute, he said this and then he said that, and then they tried to control the message.
Well,
I commend them for that.
That is kind of rule 101 when you're the news director. When somebody asks you when you're on the record not to run something, I'm going to run it.
Yeah.
That's the next
But the
thing I'm
moment,
doing.
the part you don't see in that is where he looks up to her and says, was that the right version of it? And does it again, does it a second time, a cleaner version. What I really find offensive about this is that, he's been there since 2010. And so the Republicans go after Clinton the first time on Whitewater, and they get no traction. So then they go back a second time, and they bring in Ken Starr, and he gets no traction on Whitewater. So that's 2 for 2 now in a loss. But then we get Linda Tripp and deletes to Monica, and it becomes a sexual story. But it's a sexual story now of 2 consenting adults. Now, was Clinton like an idiot? Yes. Oval Office, someone you supervise. There's lots of flags here that should have been, anybody with any sense would have seen. But it's still 2 consenting adults.
Right.
These women were being raped by football players over multiple years. And there's a difference in those 2 stories. And the moral high ground that he took this with Clinton, and then this sort of like, well, I didn't read the whole report, and we have a great football coach and a great football program, and Baylor is a place of forgiveness. Forgiveness for whom?
Yeah, that's right. The problem I have with the whole Baylor saga is that this thing was going on under their noses and nobody did anything about it. No one said anything about it.
Because we were winning.
Because we're winning, and the media was following along with that until ESPN and Outside the Lines got there and did their piece, and then the whole thing.
And I'm sorry, I don't care how many emails you get as the president. If the subject line is, I was raped at Baylor, that's going to get your attention.
Yeah.
Well, that music means we're pretty much out of time for this week. Before we got to everything that we wanted to talk about, I invite you to go to our links blog to read more about some of those topics, including NBC employees who are now bowing out of the Olympics coverage in Rio because of the Zika virus threat. You can find that links blog on KBIA's website at kbia.org under the Programs tab. If you're a fan of podcasts, give Views of the News a listen. Subscribe to our program on iTunes or wherever you find your favorite podcast. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is @ViewsOnKBIA. These are all great ways to watch and listen to the program again. Leave us questions, comments, see what we'll have next time. Bye-bye.